Hey guys, Marcus.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.
Really help the channel.
Greetings and welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. Once again, this is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And before the break, we were talking about the firearm that Vice President Harris owns. The Vice President said she owned a Glock and that she had been to a shooting range. However, that was the extent of it on the interview, and Whitaker moved along. Now, a lot of Americans have been to the shooting range. Her answer, though, opens up more questions that are problematic for Vice President Harris and really demonstrate her hypocrisy of targeting law-abiding firearm ownership while ignoring violent criminals. The Vice President should answer a few more questions. Keep in mind that she is a California resident, a state with arguably the strictest gun control laws in the country. From all appearances, the Vice President has a serious case of gun control for thee, but not for me. In 2019, the Vice President, then a U.S. Senator from California running for president herself, told the media she owned a handgun, and an aide later confirmed that the handgun was purchased years ago. The aide also stated that the VP kept the firearm locked up in her Los Angeles home. Now, I have to applaud that. She kept it locked up. She has children. Okay, good move. There's no pinpoint to the time frame, and the Vice President hasn't provided any additional details. It could mean she purchased the firearm in 2015. It could mean in 2000. Stating the firearm was purchased, however, does not confirm that it was not given to her or handed down from family. The Vice President's professional career also matters to her ability to own a Glock specifically. VP Harris began her legal career in California in the late 90s and early 2000s. She started in Alameda County's District Attorney's Office, and next she was recruited to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, and later to the Office of City Attorney of San Francisco. She was then elected District Attorney for San Francisco in 2003, followed by a jump up to the California Attorney General in 2010 and re-winning the election in 2014. What's notable here is California's strict possession and purchasing law, called the Unsafe Handgun Act, or UHA, was enacted in 2001. Glock handguns have been largely prohibited for purchase by the average Joe in California, which means Glock generations 1 through 5, or 1, 2, 4, and 5, in addition to U.S.-made Glock handguns, and are all currently prohibited for sale to the general public by California restrictions. Only Austrian-made Glock Gen 3 handgun models, which are grandfathered, are currently approved per the UHA. It's possible that she purchased her Glock before 2001, and according to the NSSF, or the National Shooting Sports Foundation, he has a Golden Gate Bridge to sell you. What's most likely is that the fact is true that the VP purchased it at some point in the past 10 years and owns a Glock. She used the UHA carve-out exception for law enforcement, which includes certain employees in the DA's office, or later when she was elected as Attorney General. I really think this is a good move for her. Anyone in that type of prominent position where they are making decisions about charging criminals, and a lot of times violent criminals, who could come after the DA or the person approving charges, or in Illinois, it's the state's attorney. But the reality is they should be able to protect themselves. So I'm okay with Vice President Harris owning a firearm. I'm not okay with violations of the law if she is going to be doing executive orders and she's violating the law. Just like people are not okay with President Trump, former President Trump, running because he has 34 felony convictions. So guess what? The playing field is equal. So the law, the unsafe firearm law in California, says this section shall not apply to any of the following: the sale or purchase of any pistol, revolver, or other firearm capable of being concealed upon the person if that gun is sold to any district attorney's office for use in the discharge of their official duties, Nor shall anything in this section prohibit sale to or purchase by sworn members of these agencies. So very interesting. I'm actually pleased that she owns a firearm and can protect her family. According to Outdoor Life magazine, they have an article that's entitled, "Here's what a Harris-Walz administration might mean for outdoorsmen, conservationists, and gun owners." We interviewed conservation leaders, firearms industry reps, and the Democratic vice presidential candidate on what a potential Harris-Walz administration might look like. And here is what they said. So this article is actually the second part of a three-part series. You can always look up outdoorlife.com if you wanted to learn more. But Kamala Harris has been explicit. If elected, her administration, quote, will not be a cut-and-paste version of the Biden administration, where she served as vice president. For many conservation leaders, that is a welcome statement. After 4 years of a Trump presidency that, while chaotic and fractious, was actually pretty good for core hunting, fishing, firearms, and conservation issues, the subsequent Biden administration was generally a disappointment for American sportsmen and sportswomen. During Trump's administration, there was a genuine concern that his Interior Secretary would turn Western lands into gas fields, and his Agriculture Secretary would let Big AG run our farm bill. We expected the Biden administration would be overall good for conservation, said the CEO of a sportsman's organization who asked not to be named. Because most nonprofit conservation groups are prohibited from endorsing or even commenting on political candidates, many talk to Outdoor Life on the condition that neither their names nor the names of their organizations would be used in election season reporting. Under Biden, we got climate policy instead of hunting and fishing policy. We got tribal co-management on public lands instead of reinvesting in infrastructure of the BLM and National Wildlife Refuge System. And we got policies built around biodiversity and social justice instead of wildlife habitat and public access. Harris's campaign says it's unfair to judge her potential presidency with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as vice president as a continuation of the Biden administration. Now, that's weird because she has said, I believe it was on The View, that she wouldn't do anything different. So that's kind of flip-flopping. So how might a Harris-Walz administration manage America's public lands, wildlife resources, and natural resource agencies? And what would the conservation priorities of this administration look like? And more importantly, what firearm laws and restrictions might a Harris-Walz administration look to implement? A lot of these are unknowns that aren't expected to be answered before the election in just a few days, partly because Harris has been a presidential candidate only for 100 days. That is not her fault, and partly because sportsman issues aren't driving most of the national dialogue around the presidential race. But here's what we know and what our sources speculate. There are a number of issues important to American hunters, anglers, shooters, and conservationists, and the Trump-Vance campaign stance on these issues is actually in the subsequent piece. So right now we're just talking about Harris. Her perspective on firearm possession and ownership have caught the attention of the firearms industry, but also police chiefs, school superintendents, and gun violence prevention activists. As a former district attorney and California attorney general, she has been characterized as both tough on crime by fellow prosecutors and soft on gun ownership rights by the NRA. She is called the gun violence in America, where guns are the leading cause of death in children under 18, as an epidemic. I don't believe that's a leading cause of death in children under 18, but it requires you to look that up. So check it out. And she has guided the Biden administration's gun policy as she oversees the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Despite her long history of working on gun policy, which has included wonky provisions for gun buybacks, stricter restrictions on gun ownership with universal background checks, which we already have in Illinois, and investment in mental health resources, Lawrence Keene has a quick read on her objection. Again, he is the NSSF speaker, for lack of a better term. She's a gun grabber. What else you need to know, says Keene, Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs. She thinks banning guns will make us safer. It doesn't make us safer. The industry isn't the bad guys. Responsible gun owners aren't the problem. They're part of the solution. Harris's documented stance on most firearm policies is informed by her desire to reduce gun violence from high-profile shootings to suicide to crimes enabled by guns. To achieve that goal, she would generally attempt to restrict the number and type of firearms sold in America and impose requirements on gun owners. Very interesting. Gun owners also want to reduce violence, but I don't say reduce gun violence because I want to reduce violence. I don't care if it's a gun, a knife, a horse, a car. As a matter of fact, in Buffalo Grove a couple of years ago, there was a quadruple murder suicide where an ex-husband came into the house. There was a restraining order that got lifted, and the judge said, I don't think you should lift this, but the soon-to-be ex-wife says, no, lift it. He showed up to the house. He killed his soon-to-be ex-wife, his mother-in-law, his 2 children, and the dog, and then committed suicide. What did he use? He used a knife. So I am a huge proponent of let's prevent violence, but not only gun violence. Let's prevent all sorts of violence, including road rage, including being angry. Now, obviously, Vice President Harris is influenced by President Biden, and President Biden was one of the sponsors of the 1994 ban on, quote, assault-style, end quote, weapons. She, I think, looks to him as a mentor. And this is a big thing. Harris made comments in September calling for the return of the federal ban that would restrict the sale and distribution of the AR-15 platform, the weapon often used in high-profile mass shootings and also the most purchased type of firearm in America. The measure that ends sales of these guns seems even more extreme now, since the magazine capacity and cosmetic attributes covered in the ban, not to mention the platform itself, are more normalized than they were when the ban took effect during the Clinton administration. The 1994 ban expired in 2004, and many hunting and firearm rights groups have made it a main goal to avoid future bans. Among the other sporting firearms that might be included in a ban are some semi-auto turkey shotguns with pistol grips, rifles with extended magazines, and firearms with flash suppressors and certain muzzle brakes. It's worth noting that an assault weapons ban implemented through executive order would probably face legal challenge and could come before the conservative Supreme Court, which overturned a Trump ban on bump stocks on the grounds of administrative overreach. An assault weapon ban is likely only part of the Harris administration approach to reducing gun violence. Other measures could include extension of red flag laws, safe storage laws, and investments in mental health screening and therapy intended to reduce not only mass shootings, but also the high rate of suicide by firearm in America. She's also likely to continue the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Hey, if you need someone for that office, I'm available. Which some pro-gun groups think have gun control organizations undue access and influence over administration policy. Hey, so if I'm in it, maybe I can provide a balanced approach. I'd love to be on the cabinet. Harris said in a White House speech in September that it is a false choice to suggest that you are either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away. I am in favor of the Second Amendment, and I believe we need to reinstate the assault weapons ban and have universal background checks, safe storage laws, and red flag laws. That's what a quote from her. Harris supported an executive Biden order signed in September that creates a new emerging firearms threats task force that will crack down on rapid-fire bump stocks and unserialized 3D printed firearm parts. She also supports universal background checks for gun purchases, extending enhanced federal checks to gun buyers under the age of 21, expanding the government's collection of gun violence data. So it's up to you on who you want to vote for. Now, if you look at it, Harris may want to ban guns, and Trump already banned bump stocks that got overturned. So are either candidate really good for firearms? You got to kind of look at the parties. I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So, on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So, if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS, 2LOGIC.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. So far in the show, we've been talking about national news, and I want to pivot a little bit to local news. There was a man charged with terrorism and hate crime in the shooting of a Jewish man walking to synagogue in Chicago in West Rogers Park. A man is facing felony terrorism and hate crime charges after authorities say he shot a Jewish man walking to synagogue and then fired at responding officers during a weekend shootout last weekend. Sidi Mohammed Abdallahi, who's 22 years old, has been charged with one felony count of terrorism and one felony count of a hate crime, Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling said at a news conference on Thursday. It's unclear if he has an attorney. He's accused of firing several shots at a 39-year-old man Saturday morning on the city's north side before firing at responding officers and paramedics multiple times from various locations, police report. Officers returned fire, striking the gunman, and Chicago police said in a release last Monday that no members of the police or fire department were injured, but the offender remains hospitalized. Investigators have not been able to interview him due to his injuries. Detectives looked through digital evidence to establish a case, including evidence from his phone that indicated he was targeting people of the Jewish faith, said the superintendent without elaboration. Evidence shows he is working alone, adding that officials don't want residents to live in fear that there's a network of people out there engaged in that activity. He's also facing 6 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 7 counts of aggravated discharge of a firearm, and 1 count of aggravated battery with the discharge of a firearm, said the release. His next court appearance is going to be this week on November 7th. Snelling said it was important for the authorities to fully investigate the incident to determine if the new charges were appropriate, and emphasized they did not secure the new counts because of public pressure or media attention. There must be sufficient evidence to support hate crimes and terrorism charges, and it was important that we took our time to thoroughly investigate and confirm that this is what was needed for this crime. We will never go out in public making statements, allegations, or accusations, or attempt to bring charges without any proof of what we're attempting to charge someone for. The mayor said there's no place in Chicago for hatred, calling the hate towards the Jewish community hideous and wicked. Yet he elected someone to the Chicago School Board who also put out some anti-Semitic stuff and ultimately resigned. So good. This is not an attack against our beloved community of Jewish people. This was an attack against us as a city, Johnson said. Anti-Semitism in Chicago does not reflect the soul of Chicago, and everyone in our city deserves to feel safe, and no one in our city should be attacked based on their beliefs, their identity, or their religion. I actually agree with him on that. Johnson echoed Snelling's comments about the residents' sense of security. The Jewish community can be assured that we are using every aspect of government to ensure they are safe, the mayor said. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox acknowledged that it is rare to bring terrorism charges, and the count against Abdallahi underscores the gravity of the crime. The charge sends a clear message. Any act that seeks to destabilize our communities through fear and hatred will face the fullest measure of accountability under the law, Fox said. And this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. They were not simply trying to rattle their sabers, but they were trying to inflict terror. In a statement posted on X on Thursday, the Midwest arm of the ADL, or Anti-Defamation League, said the charges appropriately reflect the nature of the shooting. We must all turn our attention to supporting the victim and West Rogers Park Jewish community as they recover from this heinous act, said his statement. The offender is a Mauritanian national who was encountered by the U.S. Border Patrol in San Ysidro, California on March 31st, 2023, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement said in a statement on Thursday. So what is a Mauritanian? Well, I actually looked that up because I didn't know. And a Mauritanian, or Mauritania, is a country in Africa that is mostly Arab and Muslim. I did not know that before this. So very, very interesting that he had law enforcement contact. ICE lodged an immigration detainer with Cook County Jail on Tuesday following his arrest, agency spokesman said in a statement. ICE would not provide further information about his immigration status. The shooting victim was released from the hospital Saturday afternoon, according to Deborah Silverstein, the alderman for Chicago's 50th Ward, where the shooting occurred. Thankfully, the victim did not suffer life-threatening injuries. We know that this is something that he's going to have to deal with for the rest of his days. Interestingly, in the Orthodox Jewish community, there is a kind of a quiet movement to carry concealed on Shabbat, which is the Sabbath. And for Jewish people, the Sabbath starts Friday at sundown and ends an hour after sundown on Saturdays. So wintertime, the Sabbath is actually longer than the summertime. And there have been a bunch of people who now carry firearms to synagogue. There's actually an organization called Magen Shai, Magenchi, which trains people who regularly go to synagogue in things like firearms, Krav Maga, concealed carry licensing. And these people are now carrying in synagogues. Not really in the synagogue. Usually synagogues these days have armed security, but really to walk to and from. So the Orthodox are very observant, and they do not operate any machinery on the Sabbath. That includes cars. The ultra-Orthodox don't even turn on lights or turn off lights because that's considered work. So they leave it on. They have a warmer that they leave on that they've turned on before the Sabbath so that their food can stay warm. The really religious people don't even tear toilet paper. How do they do this? Well, they pre-tear it, and it's in a basket next to the toilet. I'm not kidding. Yeah, I'm a kidder. But in this case, that is absolutely true. So, of course, we want everybody, doesn't matter their religion, their race, their creed, to be safe. And this is one nefarious character who did not act safely. Now, in reality, I'm not exactly sure how this works, but the FBI crime data has been revised. New revisions of 2022 crime data shows a shocking over 80,000 more violent crimes than in 2021. There was an additional 1,699 murders, 7,780 rapes, over 33,000 robberies, and over 37,000 aggravated assaults. It's crucial that gun owners and Second Amendment supporters make it to the polls and vote. During the September 10th debate between presidential candidates, ABC News moderator David Muir purported to fact-check Trump's statement that crime in this country is through the roof, with the contradiction that the FBI says overall violent crime is coming down in this country. Earlier, the Trump-Vance campaign released a memo to the news media titled "Joe Biden Lies on Crime," which sets out at length the problems related to their statements. As you know, Joe Biden has recently been claiming that violent crime is down under his administration. In advance of this week's presidential debate, we felt it necessary to make you aware that the actual facts show conclusively and irrefutably that Joe Biden has presided over a staggering increase in violent crime. Look up the FBI, look up their crime statistics, do a fact check. I recently was in a networking meeting with Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhofer, and he's anti-gun, but he was very, very nice, articulate, respectful, and you also got to look at the local numbers. Is crime locally up or down? And he said crime is down in Lake County. So his opponent says crime is up in Lake County. I fact-checked it. I went to the state police, I went to the FBI, and guess who was right? Democratic candidate Eric Reinhofer was right. Crime in Lake County is going down. And when we talk about crime, you want to look at the 8 major Class 1, Part 1 offenses. And those are the ones where people get hurt. Part 1 offenses include crimes like criminal homicide, which includes murder and non-negligent manslaughter, the willful killing of a human being, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. Those are the major ones. I hope this educated you. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please stay tuned. We'll have some guests on next week's show if all of my interviews work out. So have a safe week, and remember, go out and vote. This is Marcus Melnick signing off. Thank you.